You saw the clip. Richard Sherman didn't hold back, and his take lit a fuse. He called out what he perceived as a lack of impact from George Pickens, and that's the kind of commentary that gets people fired up, especially after a loss on a big stage. But before we join the pile-on, let's be clear about two things. First, emotions were raw after that game. Second, George didn't just sit on the sideline and vanish. What you saw on social media, Sherman's hot take, Pickens's initial response, then the deleted post and the follow-up photo with Dallas Cowboy for life, tells you as much about the moment as it does about the play itself. You want to know why this matters? Because when a former great like Sherman throws down a public verdict, the narrative can snowball fast. Fans start to question effort. Analysts start to propose trade scenarios. And before you know it, the locker room vibe becomes the story instead of the tape. That's why George's reaction mattered. He pushed back quickly, called out the tendency to single out one player in a team game, reminded people that explosive plays require more than one guy getting open, and then posted the picture that matters most to me. Him reaffirming he's a Cowboy. That Dallas Cowboy for life image wasn't PR fluff. It was a tone setter. I'm here, I'm invested, and I'm not letting a bad night define me. Now, I'm not saying he was perfect in that game. Nobody was. But there's a big difference between calling out reached-for critiques and legitimately pointing to poor effort. Jerry Jones heard the noise and publicly defended Pickens, saying he wouldn't confuse temperament with a lack of heart. That matters, because when ownership says they trust a player, it caps off the outside noise and sends a message inside the building. So, right now, I want to hear from you. Did Richard Sherman cross a line by making this a symbolic takedown? Or was he simply doing what analysts do and stating his view? Vote in the comments, yes or no, and tell me why in one line. If you want more breakdowns like this, hit that subscribe button and help us push to 17,000 subscribers. We're building a community that actually knows the tape before screaming trade rumors. And if you found this take useful, tap the like button so more Cowboys fans see a balanced perspective. All right, next up, we're going to dive into the actual game tape. Coverage, blocking, and the plays where Pickens either had a chance or was shut down before he could make a play. Stick with me, and I'll walk you through why one stat line doesn't settle this debate. George, look, before we go any further, I want to talk directly to you about something that set this whole firestorm off in the first place. Richard Sherman went on national TV and basically tried to question George Pickens's character, his effort, and even his value to the Cowboys. And as you know, when something like that gets thrown out into the world, especially after a tough loss, emotions run high and narratives start spinning out of control. The way Sherman delivered his criticism wasn't just sharp, it was personal. It wasn't analysis, it was an attack. And if you're a fan watching that, already frustrated with the loss, it becomes very easy to let those words push you into blaming the wrong person. But here's the thing. What Sherman did wasn't about football. It was about trying to make noise and stay relevant in the media game. Former players do this now. They push buttons because being loud gets clicks, gets views, and sometimes gets a paycheck. You and I both know that. And that's why what George Pickens said afterward mattered so much. The man didn't sit there and take it quietly. He didn't hide behind a PR shield. He spoke. And he spoke with honesty, with emotion, and with a reminder that football is still a team game. Every explosive play requires multiple pieces working together, and pointing a finger at one guy, especially after a frustrating performance, is lazy. Pickens's first response made it clear. Stop acting like wide receivers operate in a vacuum. Stop pretending one player defines a whole offense. And stop talking down to players who are actually on the field doing the work. Then he doubled down by calling out the idea that someone like Sherman, who played the game, should know better. And that resonated. Because it's true. If anyone understands coverages, double teams, bracket shells, safety rotations, it's a former cornerback. And yet Sherman acted like none of that existed, as if every incomplete pass was automatically a receiver's fault. Now, yes, George got a little wild with the wording, the spelling, the tone. But that's real emotion. That's real passion. And honestly, that's why players like Pickens connect so deeply with fans when things are going well. Sherman's response afterward proved he wasn't expecting someone to push back. The second George fired back, Sherman got in his feelings and tried to pull out the resume card. That's when you know somebody wasn't speaking from a place of fairness. They were speaking from ego. But here's the part I really want you to think about. If you're a Cowboys fan, ask yourself this: do you want a receiver who folds when he gets criticized? Or do you want a guy who stands up for himself, stands up for his teammates, and plays with that competitive edge that fuels the best players in the league? That's what makes George special. The same fire that makes him clap back on social media is the same fire that gives you 100-yard games, contested catches, and explosive plays that flip momentum. You don't get one without the other. Let me ask you something, just you and me. Do you think Sherman went too far? Yes or no? Tell me in the comments, because I want to know how many fans actually saw through what was happening. And while you're down there, take a second to subscribe to the channel. We're pushing toward 17,000 subscribers, and every single new member genuinely helps keep Cowboys coverage alive and honest. If you want real breakdowns, not the loud media circus stuff, hit that like button too. It makes a huge difference. Now let's transition into something even more important: Jerry Jones's reaction. Because if there was ever a moment that told you where the Cowboys stand organizationally on this story, it was what Jerry said publicly. And I want to break down exactly why that matters next. All right, now let us address the moment that truly shifted the entire conversation. Because whenever a story like this begins to swell, former players throwing shots, social media melting down, analysts circling like vultures, there is always one voice that can calm the storm inside the building: the owner. And Jerry Jones did exactly that. When Jerry went on the radio and publicly defended George Pickens, he did more than offer a polite endorsement. What he delivered was a clear organizational signal. This is our player. We believe in him, and we are not going to allow outside voices to rewrite the narrative for our team. That kind of message, said with conviction, resonates through every corner of the locker room. Players hear it. Coaches hear it. Even the media hears it. What stood out most was the way Jerry framed his defense. He did not rely on empty platitudes or vague encouragement. Instead, he made it very clear that he distinguishes between temperament and effort. In other words, passion on the sideline, frustration after a loss, or emotion in the heat of the moment. Those things do not mean the player lacks commitment. They mean he cares deeply. And frankly, that is something this team has needed more of over the years. Players who refuse to accept mediocrity and who hold themselves to a higher standard than even the fan base does. Jerry's comments also revealed something subtle that casual observers often miss. When ownership chooses to speak up for a player, especially one who is still relatively young, in his Cowboys tenure, It tells you exactly where that player stands in the long-term vision. Teams simply do not extend that kind of public protection to players they view as replaceable or expendable. They reserve it for pillars, pieces they intend to keep, build around, and grow with. And that brings us to the next point, the contract conversation. Now, I am not here to throw out numbers or predict exact terms, but let us be honest with each other. When the owner goes out of his way to say he is not worried about temperament, that he knows the player's heart, and that he believes in the value he brings, that is not accidental. That is groundwork. That is positioning. That tells you the Cowboys see Pickens as more than just a short-term spark. They see him as part of the core they want to develop. And for a team that has struggled at times to maintain offensive identity, having a dynamic, physical, emotionally invested wide receiver under organizational endorsement is no small thing. Now I want to bring you into this conversation directly. If you were sitting across the table from Jerry Jones, and he asked you, as a fan, whether George Pickens deserves a long-term deal, what would you tell him? Yes or no? Leave that answer in the comments because I genuinely want to know where Cowboys Nation stands on this. And while you are here, take a moment to subscribe and help us push toward our goal of 17,000 subscribers. Your support truly does matter, and it allows us to bring you honest, grounded, and level-headed Cowboys coverage without the noise or theatrics. Next, we are going to shift from the front office to the fan base itself. The social media swings, the hot takes, the overreactions, and how one narrative can flip in a matter of hours. That is where this entire story becomes even more revealing. You know, this is where things always get wild with this team, and I need to talk to you directly about it because you've seen it happen over and over. 1 week a player is the hero, carrying the offense, making highlight plays, and being praised as the next great Cowboy. Then one tough performance hits on a big stage, and suddenly that same player becomes the villain in the eyes of a loud part of the fan base. That's exactly what you just watched happen with George Pickens. It wasn't long ago that fans were talking about how he and CeeDee Lamb could become one of the most dangerous duos in the league. Then he has one off night, and suddenly half. The internet is ready to trade him, bench him, or lecture him about effort like he's never played football before. That's the social media trap. It moves fast, it hits hard, and it usually has very little to do with the truth about a player's real value. And of course, the media personalities make it 10 times worse. A guy like Richard Sherman knows exactly what he's doing. He's smart. He's been in the league. He knows how schemes work. He knows how bracket coverage works. And he knows what it's like to have an off game. But he also knows that if he gets loud and dramatic about a Cowboys player, the internet will pick it up, the clip will go viral, and his show will get attention. It's the Stephen A. blueprint that everybody tries to copy now. Instead of breaking down the game with real context, they grab the biggest name on the biggest stage and exaggerate the flaws to get the reaction they want. Fans react emotionally. Other media members pile on. And before you know it, there's a full narrative built on one moment that's taken completely out of proportion. And the players feel all of it. That's why you saw Pickens fire back online. He's young, he's emotional, he's competitive, and he's tired of being blamed for everything that goes wrong on a 53-man roster. He posted, deleted, then posted again. That's how PR works behind the scenes. Somebody taps him on the shoulder and says, "Hey, we need to clean this up a bit." But the emotion behind it was real. The most telling part was him posting himself with CeeDee Lamb and writing that Dallas Cowboy for Life caption. That was him reminding fans that despite the frustration, he wants to be here. He's not running from the pressure. He's not running from criticism. He just wants the same grace and patience any fan would want if they made a mistake on a big day. So here's the part where I pull you back into the conversation, because this is something every fan needs to hear. When the emotions are high, take a breath. Don't let one game define how you see a guy's entire future. Don't let one national personality shape how you think about your own team. When the dust settles and things get quiet, the truth usually lands somewhere in the middle. Players have bad nights. Teams have bad nights. And if you step back instead of reacting instantly, you'll see what Jerry Jones sees, what the coaching staff sees, and what the smart fans see. George Pickens is a long-term piece, not some disposable player to throw away because a media personality wants clicks. Before we move on, I want you to jump into the comments and give me your take. Which media reaction was worse for you? Richard Sherman's comments or the wave of hot take creators who jumped on the pile after him? If you saw a clip that annoyed you the most, drop the timestamp or the link. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button so we can push this channel to 17,000 strong and make sure Cowboys fans have a place where the actual story gets told, not the media version of it. You know, this whole thing with George Pickens really shows how fast the narrative can flip in this fan base. One week, he's the guy carrying the offense, the guy everyone points to as the future of the position. And then, one bad night on national TV turns him into the villain. And I'm talking overnight. That's the power of emotion, the power of social media, and honestly, the power of outside voices who know exactly how to stir the pot. It's wild how quickly some folks forget who this player has been all season just because the timing of the bad moment was loud and embarrassing. And once that emotional wave starts rolling, you know who shows up. The media amplifiers, the Shermans, the talking heads, the hot take factories. They swoop in the second they smell weakness, because criticizing the Cowboys is the easiest way to keep their numbers up. You can almost see the blueprint Stephen A. made get copied and pasted in real time. The tone gets harsher, the language gets more personal, and suddenly effort becomes a storyline even when it clearly doesn't match what was happening on the field. And fans absorb that heat. It spreads fast. We all know how this cycle goes. Then you add the social media layer, the deleted posts, the quick reactions, the player emotions flying around because these guys are human. Pickens fired back. Maybe a little too raw, maybe a little too spicy. But he's 24. He's competitive. He's coming off a national stage loss. It's not surprising that a player who holds himself to a high standard pushed back when someone questioned his effort. And look, every locker room today has a PR voice that comes around the moment a post crosses the line. That's why you saw it disappear. That's why you saw something cleaner and calmer go up after. That doesn't mean the emotions weren't real. It just means the organization understands how narratives grow in this era and tries to get ahead of it. What really matters, though, is the perspective fans bring to moments like this. You can be frustrated without flipping the entire book on a player. You can demand better without throwing someone out of the building. And it's worth remembering, every time this team loses, the outside world waits to turn the smallest spark into a wildfire. The question is whether Cowboys fans feed it or fight it. That's why I want to know what you think. Drop a comment and tell me this. Whose take was worse, Richard Sherman or the random hot take? Crowd online? If you've got a clip or timestamp, drop it so we can talk about it in the thread. You know, when everything settles and the emotions cool off, there's one thing that becomes obvious about all of this. George Pickens is still one of the most important players on this roster, and nothing that happened changes that. One bad night, one heated exchange, or one loud media take doesn't erase the talent, the production, or the upside he brings to this team. So, if we're talking about what this means moving forward, the first thing you and I have to agree on is this. Pickens is still a cornerstone piece. The Cowboys know it, the coaching staff knows it, and deep down, fans know it too. The key now is making sure the noise doesn't turn into distraction. Coaches need to do what they've always done with emotional, high-impact players. Channel the fire without trying to kill it. Teammates need to keep that locker room tight. Remind Pickens where the real support is. And make sure moments like this turn into fuel instead of frustration. This is where leadership matters, and it's where the great teams separate themselves from the ones that unravel when one thing goes wrong. Now, for fans, here's the part I want you to really take home moving forward. It's okay to be emotional. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be disappointed after a loss. But there's a big difference between reacting to a moment and rewriting who a player is because of one moment. You know how much this team leans on Pickens. You know how much attention he draws from defenses. And you saw how Jerry Jones himself stepped up and shut down that lazy narrative about effort. So the fan base has a choice. You can let the national media write the story for you, or you can stay grounded in what's actually happening with this team. There's still everything to play for, and games like these often end up being turning points, not final chapters. Before you click away, I want to know where you stand. If you're still riding with this team, drop one word in the comments. Ride. If you're out on Pickens and think the Cowboys should move on, put sell. I want to see where the real pulse of Cowboys Nation is. And if you haven't yet, help us push toward the goal of 17,000 subscribers. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and like the video so more fans hear the full story instead of the loudest take.